Be brutally honest with yourselves. Would you still be the same person if you grew up with different parents in a different country and with different societal norms? Such is the story of Shanks and Shamrock. Two brothers born from the same parent, the same island, they have the same appearance but couldn't be any more different than the other. Is a person born evil, or is it simply a product of their environment? How are you, the viewer, so certain that you wouldn't be evil if you were brought up under different circumstances? Such is the story of Shanks and Shamrock, a story of nature versus nurture. Red hair Shanks, a man who grew up as the perfect example to follow for our protagonist, Luffy, thanks to his time with Roger. And then you have Shamrock, who grew up under arguably the most disgusting character in One Piece, cold, ruthless and unforgiving Shamrock. But the $1 million question I want to ask you is, what is the point of Shamrock? And where exactly is Oda going with his story? The easy answer to go to is, oh, Shamrock will just fight Shanks and that's it. Sure, we can entertain that idea, but that's just way too predictable and on the nose. I wouldn't be against it. In fact, I'd love it if they fought, but it's incredibly cliche, and I don't think Oda, being the level of writer that he is, will go down this route. I think Shamrock's overall story would be a story about redemption and realization that he is nothing special and just a human like everybody else. And the person who will make him have this realization is the one who tried to save him at God Valley, Monkey D. Dragon. I believe Oda specifically wrote and chose Dragon to be the one to try and save Shamrock because of this narrative setup. Any other character could have been written to save Shamrock, so why did Oda specifically choose Dragon? What was the point of Dragon's failed mission? Perhaps this is Oda setting up Dragon for a redemption arc for when he meets Shamrock again. He failed to bring Shamrock to the good side the last time, but this time he will save Shamrock from the dark. Because you really have to ask yourself, what is the one bit of valuable information that Dragon has that can completely change Shamrock's view on his father, Garling, and by extension, the rest of the Celestial Dragons? It's the fact that Dragon knows exactly what happened to Shamrock's mother during the God Valley incident. Now this is key, because what if you never knew about your own mother all your life? Wouldn't you want to know? Even the most evil Celestial Dragon would probably wonder about their mother, because whether they want to accept it or not, they are human too. There is absolutely no way Shamrock, or Shanks for that matter, don't wonder about who their mother was, what she believed in, or what happened to her, and her final words. Think about the type of person Garling is and how he treated his partner at the time, seeing her as subhuman, something to be used and thrown away. And that's the key. This was a person he saw as disposable trash. So he has no reason at all to tell Shamrock or Shanks about their mother. In fact, he most likely lied about who their mother was, saying that she was a Celestial Dragon to save Shamrock from the shame of being half human. Maybe when Dragon tells Shamrock his mother's final words, as in, do not let my kids end up with Garling, and the exact way her life was brought to an end by Garling, Shamrock will have the realization that not only is he not the god he thought he was, that he's actually half human, or better yet completely human, but that the customs and traditions of the Celestial Dragons, such as the hunting games, took away the one thing he desired the most in his life, something he may have even felt envious and jealous about when perhaps looking at other Celestial Dragons, a mother and son relationship. Garling and the Celestial Dragon's traditions took away his one lifelong wish and birthright. And so, this is where the theory gets crazy, because who is Garling's final matchup during the final war? Garling also didn't even meet Dragon on God Valley, so it's unlikely to be Dragon. But if you take into account everything I have said about Shamrock's realization moment, perhaps he will fight Garling as a way to bring justice to his mother and to redeem himself for actually believing that the Celestial Dragons was the right path in life. But it gets even crazier, because when you look at One Piece chapter 1167, Shamrock generally seems to enjoy being in Shanks' presence. And sure, Shamrock spoke about Shanks in a very disappointed manner, saying he left the Holy Land to go and live with the pirates. But that's the point. he's disappointed because he cares for his brother, which only further backs up my point about him caring about his mother, since he clearly, in a subtle way, cares about family. This sets up the final war matchups perfectly. Captain Eustace Kid versus Shamrock. Now I know, I'll get back to this later, don't go anywhere. Shanks versus Blackbeard, Shamrock versus Garling, as we already discussed, and Dragon versus one of the Goddessay or Emu. Because Shamrock and Shanks are twins, their stories parallel each other but in inverse. Shanks grew up as good, Shamrock grew up as bad. Shanks returned to the Holy Land for a short while, and Shamrock, he will return to the surface world where he was born, reuniting with his brother, just like Shanks did during chapter 1167 when he went back to the Holy Land. Call me crazy, but Shamrock having a redemption arc was foreshadowed even during the Elbaf arc and during chapter 1167. In this panel, Shamrock is actually dressed like how Shanks usually does, with his chest showing. Every time that we see Shanks, he is dressed in this really free-spirited way. And Shanks, on the other hand, is dressed like how Shamrock usually dresses, chest covered, smart, and represents the wealth and luxury of the celestial dragons. However, back on Elbaf, Shamrock is now dressed how Shanks was dressed back in the Holy Land, possibly foreshadowing that Shamrock will become more of a good person like Shanks was, since how you dress says a lot about your personality as much as it does about your fashion sense. This type of narrative foreshadowing suggests that the walls around Shamrock's identity are beginning to crack, that the influence of his brother is reaching him in ways he doesn't fully understand yet. Meanwhile, Shanks momentarily adopting Shamrock's refined, closed off style mirrors the idea that their roles in the story are moving towards an intersection point. Their appearances aren't just reversed for fun. Oda is visually telling us that their paths are about to cross in a meaningful, transformative way. Now, let me talk about Captain Eustace Kid. Why does Captain Eustace Kid hate Shanks so much? Like, genuinely, why? Because Kid's hatred seems very specific. It's not like he hates everyone, only Shanks. It's unlike Shanks to do something so immoral that it traumatizes someone for the rest of their lives. So what if Kid thought Shamrock was actually Shanks and has been hunting down the wrong man? We don't know much about Kid's backstory, so what if his hatred for Shanks originates from a traumatic experience because of Shamrock? After all, it wouldn't be a surprise if Kid suffered through a celestial dragon hunting competition. Now, why did Oda introduce the Sabaody trio, Luffy, Law and Kid, and then pay off this trio during the Onigashima raid? But do you notice the missing pieces to the puzzle? Law and Kid each has something that the other lacks. Kid has Conqueror's Haki, but no backstory. But Law has an extended Straw Hat worthy backstory, but no Conqueror's Haki. I believe Oda is actually saving Kid's backstory as it relates to Shamrock and Shanks. There is most likely a narrative reason why Oda has kept Kid's hatred for Shanks so ambiguous and mostly off screen. I believe Shamrock must have been the reason why Kid may have lost someone close to him, someone who he admired, because what is the difference between Kid and Luffy? Why is one a winner and one a loser? Because Luffy had the guidance of his mentor Shanks and also Rayleigh and now Scopa. His experiences and lessons with these mentors guided him throughout his journey, both physically and mentally, like when he didn't fight back against Bellamy, because true strength is having the power to fight but choosing not to, as some fights are not worth fighting, a lesson taught to him by Shanks in chapter 1. But Kid represents the complete opposite of this idea. He will fight anyone who mocks him, and this is why Kid fails and Luffy doesn't. Kid has no mentor to guide him, because perhaps he lost his mentor because of Shamrock, possibly during an altercation during a hunting games competition or simply on the seas. And so his reason to be a pirate, aside from getting the One Piece, essentially Kid's secret dream, is to get revenge for his fallen master. So when he stumbled across Shanks before or during the time skip, he thought that was actually Shamrock. confusing the two, and the rest was history, losing his arm. Perhaps Kid will realise his mistake when he sees Shanks and Shamrock standing side by side, realising that everything Kid was fighting for and everything he knew about his life was all a big mistake and one big mix-up. This is where Kid and Shanks put their differences aside as Kid lets go of his grudge towards Shanks, but now directs his fist towards Shamrock as they clash. So with that, here is the uncomfortable truth Oda is forcing us to confront. If Shamrock had been raised the way Shanks was, would he still be the monster we see today? Or if you were raised the way Shamrock was, would you even recognize yourself? This is a story of nature versus nurture, Shanks and Shamrock, Dragon and Kid, if you want to include him as well. The moment Shamrock realizes he isn't a god, he isn't a monster, he isn't a celestial dragon, but a human being whose entire identity was engineered by a man who threw away his own partner like trash and took away his one desire to have a mother and son relationship. That is the moment One Piece changes forever, as Shanks and Shamrock will join forces against Ibu. The foundation for Kid's importance really begins at his introduction scene during Sabaody, when we saw him with Law and Luffy. Why is Law the only one given a backstory, his own arc? He has been given the spotlight whilst Kid has been given breadcrumbs basically. He's doing this with Dragon, he's doing this with Shanks, he's doing this with characters that he sees as important and he'll save them for later. Do not write Kid off just yet because he will make a comeback during Elbaf. I believe that Kid defeating Big Mom was amazing narrative setup for the Elbaf arc, as Big Mom is widely hated amongst the giants. And so, because Kid defeated Big Mom, they won't allow such a man to lose his life, even if he tried to attack Shanks, because what they admire the most is warrior spirit and heart, and Kid has that. Kid attacked Shanks, Kaido, Big Mom, knowing that he stood no chance. What will most likely happen is that when the Holy Knights rampage all over Elbaf, Kid will be rescued from the ocean's floor by the giants, and then teaming up with Luffy, as he has something that can be developed and used against the Holy Knights, and that is Conqueror's Haki, because Conqueror's Haki is the key to stopping their regeneration. Haki blooms during battle. We saw this with Luffy versus Katakuri, Luffy versus Kaido, and I believe Kid will have a Haki bloom against a Holy Knight, and that Holy Knight is Shamrock, the guy who looks like Shanks. However, that is assuming that the giants don't at least tie up Kid first and put him under questioning, like how they tied up Loki, asking him, why are you attacking Shanks? Why do you hate Shanks so much? And this is where we will finally get the Kid backstory that will absolutely break One Piece YouTube, and is the backstory that I would have predicted first. The theory goes that the reason why Kid hates Shanks is because he thinks Shanks is Shamrock. In other words, he has been hunting down the wrong man this entire time, and I have pretty good evidence and reason as to why that is. So how? Why? It's so unlike Shanks to do something so horrible and traumatic to somebody at a young age, especially when we know how he treated Luffy. Luffy, a character with a strong will, very much like Kid, because when you really stop to think about it, Kid's hatred for Shanks is really oddly specific. He doesn't hate the other Yonko, he doesn't hate the worst generation, heck, his entire meeting and alliance with Hawkins and Apu was to take down Shanks before another Yonko showed up in Kaido. And from what we've seen in the story, you could argue Kid has more reasons to hate Kaido than Shanks, considering what he did to his right hand man. Which begs the question, what on earth did Shanks do? Remember, Shanks is the example to follow in the story. Oda is saying, be like Shanks, act like Shanks, and Luffy wants to be like him in morals and lessons and to one day surpass him. So again, how could Shanks of all people make someone so full of hatred. Well, who is one person that actually looks exactly like Shanks but is actually evil? That's right, Shamrock. Oda has been saving Kid's story for Elbaf because this entire time it was Shamrock, and this was the exact same arc Shamrock was revealed. Isn't that a coincidence? Oda has been saving Kid's backstory because revealing his backstory too early would have wasted Shamrock's introduction in Elbaf being Shanks' twin. That was the big reveal. Captain Eustace Kid often has a bad reputation within the One Piece fandom, but what makes Kid a loser and Luffy a winner? It's simple. Luffy had the teachings and the guidance of his mentors, Shanks, Rayleigh, and now Scobbagaban, to guide him throughout the Grand Line, whether that's physically or mentally, whereas Kid has no mentor. As soon as we are introduced to him in the Sabaody arc, it is highlighted that what separates him from the other Worst Generation members is that he hurts innocent civilians. He has no morals. That's because his mentor figure was defeated in battle and taken away from Kid by Shanks, or should I say Shamrock, and this person was Captain John, which explains why Captain John has Kid's devil fruit, because Kid is inheriting Captain John's will. The same way Luffy looks up to Shanks, Captain Kid looks up to Captain John, and that explains why they both start their names with Captain. Captain Kid, Captain John. Kid is taking inspiration from Captain John. It all adds up. And if Kid is inheriting Captain John's will, then it makes sense why Kid ate Captain John's devil fruit. It all makes sense now. And what a coincidence, both Shamrock and Captain John were both on God Valley. To lay out the full picture, I believe Captain John stumbled across Kid the same way Shanks stumbled across Luffy. Kid wanted to go out to sea with Captain John, but Captain John ended up losing his life to Shamrock. Kid then inherited his will, taking on his name, Captain, and eating his devil fruit and swearing to get revenge for Captain John. Then, as he grows up, he sees the wanted poster of Shanks and confuses him for Shamrock. Akagami! He shouts as he sets sail for the first time, and the rest is history, losing 2 of his confrontations with the red hair pirates, which is where we are today. This takes us back to Elbaf, where Shamrock will return to Elbaf after leaving the Holy Land, and when Shanks returns to Elbaf to protect the giants from Emu, since there's no way the Straw Hats are beating Emu even before the final war, meaning that Shanks and Shamrock will be in the same location as Kid, and this is where Kid will have his realization moment. Seeing them both together in the same location will make him question if he's been going after the wrong man this entire time. This is where Shamrock reveals the truth about Kid's past, how it was actually him who defeated Captain John and not Shanks. This will lead to Kid letting go of his grudge towards Shanks, because just think about it, isn't it weird how Luffy and Kid team up a lot when Kid hates Shanks, Luffy's mentor? Quite funny, isn't it? This is where Kid will let go of his grudge and instead direct his fist toward Shamrock, and they will clash in Elbaf, or this is set up for their clash during the final war. Kid having no backstory, no arc yet. Kid for some reason having Conqueror's Haki when more popular characters like Sanji do not. It's all by design, because Oda was waiting for the arrival of Shamrock to finally tell Kid's story. If I was to ask you, who is attacking the Holy Land right now? Could it be the revolutionaries? Could it be Blackbeard? Heck, could there be a traitor within the Holy Land itself? But have you ever considered this angle? What if I told you that the ones who are attacking the Holy Land are actually cross-guild? Now, I know what you're thinking. Out of everybody it could be, why would it be cross-guild? Let me answer that question with another question. Why would Oda keep the identity of the attacker a mystery when it would be so clearly and obviously the revolutionaries or Blackbeard? Well, maybe because it is an unlikely yet very likely group. Cross-guild. Now yes, the revolutionaries are the ones destroying the Celestial Dragon's food supplies, but that is a separate matter from literally turning the Holy Land into a sea of flames. Think about it this way, right? Another attack on the Holy Land, already after burning their flag, taking back Kuma, fighting the Gorosei and Emu, and destroying their food stock seems a bit redundant, don't you think? And a bit too easy to predict if they are the ones attacking the Holy Land. like I said at the beginning, it wouldn't really be a mystery. Not to mention the Blackbeard angle, right? Blackbeard wants to make Hachinosu a government affiliated nation and wants to become king, using Garp as his bargaining chip. Why would he attack the Holy Land? Isn't it in his best interest not to attack the Holy Land? Shamrock was called into action to defend the Holy Land, right? And do you know who would absolutely love, and I mean love, to fight Shamrock right now? That would be Mihawk. Mihawk could be seeking out Shamrock to fight him because he sees Shanks in Shamrock, essentially his replacement. We know that Mihawk goes around the One Piece planet bored out of his mind looking for opponents, even going as far as sinking Don Krieg's fleet in the Grand Line and then following them back to the East Blue to finish the job. This is the kind of man we're talking about. He will do anything for a good fight. Now this is where Crocodile comes into the picture, because I believe Mihawk wanted to challenge Shamrock to a duel, but this was just a distraction for the much bigger objective for Cross Guild. Because if you remember back in Alabasta, Crocodile's entire goal was to get his hands on one of the ancient weapons, Pluton. I can't speak today. On top of the fact that he already hates the government, and I mean he hates the government. His Operation Utopia plan was based on creating a utopia capable of competing with the world government using Pluton. And in Marineford, Crocodile put aside his beef with Whitebeard, right, and saved Ace because he said that the world government winning would be a lot worse than Whitebeard winning. So I believe after Vegapunk's speech about the Lucia Kingdom's destruction and the whole world experiencing an earthquake and the sea levels rising, Crocodile put 2 and 2 together and figured out, hey, the world government probably have their hands on the other ancient weapon, Uranus, and Crocodile saw an opening because that opening was created by the revolutionaries, and then they invaded the Holy Land with Mihawk. Mihawk finally getting to meet somebody on Shanks' level, and quite literally the spitting image of Shanks himself. And to double down on this, even Mihawk hates the government as he was known as the Marine Hunter. Now yes, the counter argument to this theory is that Crocodile versus Emu, who we assume has Uranus, would be ridiculous. But I am not suggesting that. I think Crocodile just assumes it's in the hands of the Gorosei. Emu's existence is still a secret. And I guess another counter argument you could say is that, well, are you suggesting that Shamrock beat Mihawk in a sword duel? Well, consider this. Garling was hyping up his son, Shamrock, as the one who dealt with the problem, as we saw in chapter 179, suggesting that Shamrock beat Mihawk. But I'm very doubtful of Garling's credibility, and by extension the world government's credibility, because Garling was dubbed the champion of God Valley, but it turns out he was literally the bum of God Valley. And in Alabasta, the world government tried to take credit for Crocodile's defeat, even though the credit belonged to Luffy. So did Shamrock really prove that Mihawk is a fraud? No, it was probably a draw, much like the many intense battles between Mihawk and Shanks that sent ripples across the New World, so much so that even Whitebeard could hear the sound of them. And I know what you're thinking, what about Boogie? Well, Boogie is a coward and he stayed behind. We don't talk about Boogie. Well, maybe getting the ancient weapons would help Boogie get the One Piece, but that's assuming Crocodile got the ancient weapons, which I don't think he did. I think he failed in that mission, but probably got something else of value that we don't know about. To me, this makes perfect sense, since the Cross Guild needs to start making moves within the New World, since they are contenders to be claimers of the One Piece, so they need to start making their moves like everybody else's. You are wrong about Blackbeard versus Shanks, because it was not Blackbeard who scarred Shanks, it was Rock's Deezer Beck. Blackbeard has Davy Jones's locker. You really have to ask yourselves, how on earth did Blackbeard even manage to scar Shanks in the first place? That should be impossible. Have you ever thought about how insane of a feat it is for Blackbeard with no devil fruit to scar Shanks? Haki monster Shanks, a Shanks who frequently dueled with Mihawk, clashes with Mihawk that will send ripples across the New World, with even Whitebeard mentioning their impact, a Shanks who was strong enough to be part of the Holy Knights. Do you remember Marineford? Blackbeard, despite having not only one devil fruit, the strongest Logia, a second devil fruit, one of the strongest Paramecias, when Shanks invites him to a fight, despite Blackbeard already beating him in the past with no devil fruit and no haki, we assume, Blackbeard then suddenly decides, nah,
Nah, it's way too early for me to fight you, despite already beating, not beating Shanks, but scarring Shanks in the past without any devil fruit and no haki.
And then bums out of the fight because he got what he wanted. The answer is simple. He did not fight Blackbeard. He fought Rox D. Zebek, or Davy Jones, thanks to Davy Jones's locker. And with the recent chapter of 1167 and taking the timeline into account, Shanks' confrontation with Blackbeard is exactly what led him going to the Holy Night in the first place, for one secret undercover mission to get back the Nika fruit. There is absolutely no way that these two events are not linked together. The event of Shanks getting his scar and the event of Shanks going to the Holy Land. Why would Oda give Shanks a scar conveniently at the same time he goes to the Holy Land? Clearly these two events link to each other. Blackbeard does not know the location of the Nika fruit, but guess who does? Rox D. Zebek. In today's video, there are 3 long mysteries that I am going to solve. How did such a weak Blackbeard with no devil fruit, scar, haki, monster, future sight, Shanks, who clashed with Mihawk several times? Why did Blackbeard cover Whitebeard in a black cloth before taking his devil fruit? And what exactly led Shanks to go to the Holy Knights? It is no coincidence that all 3 of those questions can be linked back to my original theory that Blackbeard has Davy Jones's locker storing multiple souls. The souls of Rox D. Zebek, Davy Jones, Eris, Whitebeard, how he is able to wield more than one devil fruit, and eventually 3 in the future. 1 fruit for each soul. Davy Jones's locker answers every single mystery regarding Blackbeard. That is right, every single mystery. You don't believe me? Too unbelievable? I'm not right in the head. Okay, just let me cook. Davy Jones as a concept definitely exists in One Piece. Matter of fact, Nico Robin spoke about the legend during the Long Ring Long Land arc. Well, that's a mouthful. Nico Robin spoke about how Davy Jones was cursed to roam the seas forever, trapping whatever sunk to the ocean floor into Davy Jones's locker. Do you really think that this is a throwaway line or throwaway concept from Oda? Especially considering the fact that we got introduced to the recent lore reveal that Davy D. Jones was the original king of the world. And not only that, Rox D. Zebek and Blackbeard, 2 of the most important characters in the series, is related to Davy Jones. This adds so much weight to Davy Jones's locker as a concept. And if Davy Jones has long since passed, what use does it have currently in the One Piece world? How can it be used if Davy D. Jones isn't with us anymore? And if Rox D. Zebek is not with us anymore either, that only leaves one person, Blackbeard. Blackbeard has Davy Jones's locker. There is evidence all over the manga for the fact that Blackbeard has Davy Jones's locker. Let's just go to Jaya for example. Yes, you guessed that right. You know what I am talking about. It's not him, it's them. The reason why this holds so much weight is because it comes from Luffy. It is already a pretty established fact that Luffy is an excellent reader character. By all means, Blackbeard gave a wonderful speech about dreams. A speech that Luffy completely would agree with. If this was anybody else, Luffy would be smiling, cheering, but no, he seems spooked out, as if he had seen a ghost. A soul, perhaps Rox's soul, Davy's soul. A man's dream never dies. Blackbeard is quite literally carrying on Rox's will. You are afraid that somebody will inherit Davy's will. It's almost as if Rox knew that Blackbeard would inherit Davy's will. And what adds even more weight to this idea is that Zoro said the same thing as Luffy. It's not him, it's them. Why? Because Zoro pretty early on unlocked observation haki. During Alabaster, he literally got observation haki. That's how he beat Mr. One. If we go with the idea that Blackbeard has Davy Jones's locker and therefore can store multiple souls, which leads him to eat multiple devil fruits, then theoretically it makes even more sense why Blackbeard is going around hunting more devil fruits, because he can eat more than just 2 or 3 or 4. He can eat multiple. Until otherwise established, Davy Jones's locker doesn't have a set limit, or it does have a limit, but it's just a lot more higher than we think. Do you really think the bums on Blackbeard's crew are going to become relevant characters? Like, no, they are not. They are there as background fodder. Bums. The only ones who matter on Blackbeard's crew are the main people we see on Jaya and the people we see from Impel Down. Also, have you ever wondered why Blackbeard specifically waited so long to get one specific devil fruit, the Darkness Devil Fruit? If we go with the idea about Davy Jones's locker, perhaps Rox Dizabek, one of the two devil fruits that he wanted, was most likely the Darkness Fruit, which now makes sense why Blackbeard wanted the Darkness Fruit. This also naturally leads into, why did Blackbeard want Whitebeard's devil fruit? Well, if we look at Rox's point of view, Whitebeard was the strongest, second strongest on his crew. So if you want to take down Emu, you're going to need his devil fruit to some extent, especially if you want to use the ancient weapons. Get Pluton, you know, break down Wano's borders. Also, do you not find it a bit weird or suspicious that Blackbeard felt the need to cover Whitebeard in a black cloth before taking his devil fruit? Like, why did he need to do that? We have never seen anything like that in One Piece. Before he did that and ever since he did that, we have never seen anything like that. Why did he do that? Especially when we've seen Blackbeard hunt other devil fruit users for the devil fruit. He's never had the need to whip out a black cloth. do you get where I'm coming from? Blackbeard, or more specifically Oda, did not want us to see and the Marines to see him actually using, opening up whatever, however he does it, him actually using Davy Jones's locker to store Whitebeard's soul and attain his devil fruit. Don't you find it a bit weird? We don't actually see Blackbeard eating Whitebeard's devil fruit. No, he just, after he removes the black cloth, after he does that, he just has the ability, almost as if he took Whitebeard's soul. Like, come on, are you on my side yet? He has Davy Jones's locker. He has it. Especially with all this Davy Jones lore that we're getting. It has to be connected. Now we finally know why Blackbeard doesn't sleep. It's not that he doesn't sleep. It's just that when he does sleep, one of his stored souls, either it be Rox Dizabek, Davy D. Jones, Eris, Whitebeard, one of these souls takes over, making it appear like he never sleeps. And if we go all the way back to Dressrosa and we look at Cavendish, every time he slept, what happened? His other ego took over. Hakuba took over. Now that might just be a gag, but why would Oda establish in the first place that Blackbeard does not sleep? You could say, oh, he's just traumatized from God Valley, but if Blackbeard is just meant to be a human being, you know, he's not some special race, he's not anything like that, he's just a human being, that doesn't add up. The only thing that does add up is that he has multiple souls. And after the recent chapter of 1167, Shanks' scar is very, very closely related to why he's even on the Holy Land. His encounter with Blackbeard slash Rock slash Davy slash Eris, whatever, his encounter with Blackbeard is what led him there. Now, what is Shanks' ultimate mission in life? To find and guide the next Joy Boy, fulfilling Roger's will. Who knows the location of the Elbaf Devil Fruit, which is most likely the Nika fruit? Why? Because the people of Elbaf, their entire culture is about Nika. So it only makes sense why they would guard the Nika fruit. And this also makes sense why the world government in 800 years hasn't found the Nika fruit. It's being guarded by the strongest race in One Piece. Back to the question, who knows the location of Elbaf's Devil Fruit? Rox Dizabek. So now to the ultimate long-awaited question. How did such a weak Blackbeard with no devil fruit, Scar, Haki Monster, Future Sight, Shanks, who dueled with Mihawk many times, Shanks who was strong enough to be one of the God's Knights, how did he do it? And then not only that, why did Blackbeard feel the need to run away from Shanks after getting two of the strongest devil fruits in One Piece? Blackbeard was able to get around Shanks' observation haki by manipulating his locker to switch souls at the right moment, being able to close in on Shanks and leave a permanent scar and a permanent reminder of the danger of Blackbeard's era. He most likely allowed the souls of Rox Dizabek and Davy Jones to carry him in the fight. After all, he was the underdog. Maybe this granted him access to some of their haki. This would also make sense why Blackbeard was somehow able to sense Luffy's haki back in Jaya, back when Blackbeard didn't even have haki. And isn't it a coincidence that this is the earliest mention of haki in the entire series, and it comes from Blackbeard, character who
let's face it, strongest asset is not haki, it's his devil fruits. Despite Shanks' amazing observation haki, Davy Jones's locker can most likely confuse anybody's observation haki due to them switching souls multiple times and due to the amount of souls that are actually stored in the locker. Just think about it, if you've got 10 souls stored in your locker, it's pretty hard to tell who is going to do what with your future sight. Perhaps you can look into the future of Blackbeard, but then by the time you do that, Blackbeard's already switched to Roxy the Beck. And then if Shanks looks into Roxy the Beck's future, Blackbeard can just switch to his own self again, his original self, and get around his observation haki, and then leave a scar. Like, when you really think about it, this is probably the most broken ability. And the reason why he ran away at Marineford is because this specific fight where he scarred Shanks was a 1v1. On Marineford, he had his whole crew with him. Shanks had his entire crew with him. So there's no way that they're gonna let that happen. Not to mention Blackbeard was already pretty fatigued with this fight with Whitebeard. I don't even think Blackbeard is that strong physically. He's just a character with hacks. He has devil fruits and multiple souls. As bonus evidence, isn't it weird that Blackbeard has 3 skulls on his pirate flag? Almost as if he is saying, look at me, I've got 3 souls. So in conclusion, how did such a bum like Blackbeard scar such a monster like Shanks? It's simple. Shanks was not only fighting Blackbeard, he was fighting Roxy the Beck, Davy Jones, possibly Eris since she was a pirate as well. Blackbeard, using Davy Jones's locker, got around his observation haki, closed in on him and scarred him. He then revealed the location of the Nika fruit and then set foot on the Holy Land, leaving a permanent scar on Shanks and a permanent impression.
Do you remember when Roxy the Beck mentioned those 2 devil fruits in order to take down Emu? I feel like everyone just skims over this fact, but Roxy the Beck said only Harold can eat that fruit because only he can realize his full potential. But not only that, only he can free the Gallilar giants. You might be wondering, okay, how does that relate to Loki and Emu and Shanks defeating Loki and all that jazz? Like, how does that relate? Don't worry, I will get to that. Right, okay, so we know that Loki ate the devil fruit that Rox wanted Harold to eat. We know that, right? But what if the other devil fruit that Rox wanted was the Nika fruit that Luffy has? Keep that in the back of your mind, because now let's look at this from Shanks' perspective. Why did Shanks wait all these years to go after the One Piece? Why did he wait until the arrival of Gear 5? Maybe when Roger found the One Piece he was too early because the One Piece itself couldn't be used without Joy Boy's power. But maybe it wasn't only because of Luffy's power hadn't awakened yet. Maybe it was because nobody had eaten Elbaf's legendary devil fruit. Nobody had awakened the Gallirar giants. After all, that was Rox's plan in order to take down Emu. And by the time Roger found the One Piece, he was already well aware of Emu because of God Valley. And what did Roger want Shanks to do? Find the next Joy Boy, i.e. find his son. Roger wanted his son, Ace, to be the next Pirate King. And so, Shanks, wanting to inherit Roger's will, was given this specific mission. A. Find the Nika fruit. B. Give it to Ace. And C. Guide Ace to be the next Joy Boy, instead of going after the One Piece and defeating Emu and the world government. Because without these requirements, you are simply way too early to even think about trying to take down Emu. So when Luffy awakened his devil fruit, Shanks knew it was time. He knew it was time to finally take down the world government, and he knew this time going after the One Piece is not pointless. So you might be wondering, okay, how does that fit with Loki versus Shanks? Well, by the time Loki actually set out to sea, Luffy hasn't even awakened his devil fruit yet. But not only that, but he also still hadn't freed the Gallirar giants. So you all remember Loki's special bounty, right? Well, why did he have a special bounty? Well, after what happened to Rox and after Harold being betrayed by Emu, what if Loki actually tried to invade the Holy Land by climbing the Red Line, mirrored by how he climbed the Adam Tree? Maybe Loki stormed the Holy Land, but Shanks stopped him. This makes total sense because Loki said that he was going to destroy the world, and we know the world has new meaning now. So essentially you could interpret this as Loki wanting to destroy Emu, the one who took down Rox, the one who was responsible for what happened to Harold. However, because of Shanks' contract, because he was a Holy Knight apprentice, being in the Holy Land and near Emu is way too big of a risk itself, so he had no choice but to go all out from the start. And what do I mean by that? I mean using his Conquest Haki, knocking out Loki, but not only Loki, the Gorosei as well, and probably made Emu scream the same way Joy Boy did. And would you have a look at that? Joy Boy's Haki was compared to Shanks's. Maybe that is why Oda gave us a hint that Joy Boy's haki and Shanks' haki are very similar. What if Shanks did this because he knew that trying to take down Emu before Luffy had awakened his Devil Fruit, before Loki had freed the Galara Giants, and you know, maybe Loki actually might have to awaken his Devil Fruit as well. Assuming of course that Gaban told him about all this Elbaf lore. With all that in mind, what if Shanks was like, you know what Loki, I appreciate the effort but it's just way too early, man. You've got to wait for somebody called Luffy in the first place. And have you ever thought about why Loki called Shanks a cowardly pirate? Maybe it's because Shanks didn't want to fight the world government with or without a completed plan, like Rocksteady the Beck did his inspiration. But Shanks actually did Loki a favour, it's just that he doesn't realise it because he's so, you know, blinded by revenge. Okay, cool. But why was Shanks at Elbaf before, during the Egghead arc? Did he come there for a specific purpose or what? We know that Shanks is a very intentional person. He doesn't do things for no reason. Like in chapter 1, he wasn't hanging out at the bar for no reason. He was actually looking for Ace because he was the next in line to be Pirate King, i.e. the next in line to inherit that fruit. Perhaps Shanks was there to tell the people who really knew what happened with Loki and Harold the truth behind that entire fight. What if he was there to tell them, people like Elder Jarul and Gaban, that Luffy had actually awakened his Gear 5 form, and so the time has actually come to set Loki free and liberate the world, because that was Rox's plan. He needed 2 Devil Fruits. What if one of them was Luffy's fruit? To further back up this theory, it was Gaban, one of the people who knew the truth, who actually told Hadrudin to set Loki free. Maybe that was because of what Shanks told him. And what's even crazy is, now that Loki's plan is now set in motion, you know, he can finally set out to see, because Luffy's here, Luffy's awakened his fruit, Loki's ate his fruit. But the thing is, they still haven't freed the Galara Giants from Punk Hazard, which really puts into perspective the gravity of the situation that Loki was doing in the Holy Land. Shanks really did him a favour there. And really, Shanks did the entire world a favour here, not just Loki, because it's very much clear that in order to bring the dawn of the world, both Luffy and Loki are very much needed. In Sabaody, it was Ray Lee, a former Roger pirate who held off Kizaru, so now to elevate that, this time it will be Shanks, Roger's prodigy, to fight off Emu, whilst Kuma, like in Sabaody, sends the Straw Hats away. But this is not wishful thinking, there is a lot of foreshadowing and setup for Shanks to fight Emu here. First of all, the Joy Boy haki connection. Shanks' haki was compared to Joy Boy, Emu's worst enemy, tying Shanks and Emu together. But that's not all. Emu already marked Shanks with the shallow sea contract. Shanks literally made sure to not go in close distance to Emu because of this mark. But now that Shanks has lost the arm which had the contract on it, it seems like this was the whole setup in the first place to allow Shanks near Emu again. Maybe Oda wrote that specific dialogue and scene for this exact setup ever since chapter 1 and ever since the Alba flashback. Maybe that was the setup, because when Harold fought Loki, his real personality came back for a few seconds when Loki removed his contract symbol on his arm, showing that removing it does undo its effect. Also, Shanks is always hanging out in Elbaf. Do you really think he won't come back to protect it? Considering Emu has arrived on Elbaf and is releasing a tremendous amount of haki, it's most likely that Shanks can actually sense Emu's haki through observation haki. And no, distance is not an issue. Never ever forget, he beat Kaido in the New World, and then less than 24 hours later, he made it to Marineford. So, Gartel Island, where Shanks was last seen, probably would take him 10 minutes max if he was to hurry over to Elbaf. And consider this, if Joy Boy's haki made Emu scream and sent all the Gorosei home, and that was from one single rope, imagine Shanks, who has haki on par with Joy Boy himself, competing with Emu head on. Shanks will send Emu home. One of the biggest unsolved mysteries in One Piece is, what is Kuzan's real goal in joining Blackbeard? Is he staying with Blackbeard for the long run, or will he stab Blackbeard in the back? But what if I told you that there is pieces of evidence that you have definitely missed that prove that Kuzan is a double agent? Yes, not only do I think that Kuzan is a Straw Hat spy, but I also think he's a Shanks spy. And by the end of the video, you will definitely join the agenda, my agenda. This agenda train where Kuzan is a spy, a double spy. Let me give you one piece of genius foreshadowing laid out by Oda that you've definitely missed, that definitely hints that Kuzan being a Straw Hat spy is almost guaranteed. Because, did you catch it? The inverse has already happened. There was already a Blackbeard spy on the Straw Hat crew. Does that ring any bells? Yes, I'm talking about Caribou. From Fishman Island all the way to Egghead, Caribou acted as a Blackbeard double agent, gathering information on the ancient weapons for Blackbeard, meaning Blackbeard is definitely going to raid Fishman Island for Poseidon and he's going to raid Wano for Pluton, meaning that because of Caribou, Blackbeard now has the upper hand on the Straw Hat Pirates in terms of dominating the new world. Because of Caribou, the Blackbeard Pirates have now tipped the balancing scales and has won up to the Straw Hats. So what if this was a setup and foreshadowing of Kuzan doing the reverse of that? A Straw Hat spy within Blackbeard's crew this time, the complete opposite, gathering information on their plans and their goals to claim the ancient weapons that Caribou relayed to them. The information that Caribou worked so hard on gathering for Blackbeard will now get relayed back to the Straw Hats because of Kuzan. Essentially, a spy taking out another spy. I believe that the person he is sending all this information to is Nico Robin through the Denden Mushi, who he is now on very good terms with and has a long history with. Nico Robin and Kuzan, their storylines are interconnected. And I know what you're thinking, if that's the case, why hasn't Nico Robin mentioned anything about Kuzan? Well, Nico Robin is a woman who holds many secrets close to her chest. I mean, she still hasn't revealed what she learned with the Revolutionary Army. Why hasn't she told Luffy about meeting his literal dad, Dragon? Oda intentionally keeps Robin quiet about certain information. I mean, we still don't know everything that she's read on the poneglyphs. So picture this. If Kuzan is sending information to Robin that because of Caribou, Blackbeard now knows the location of Poseidon, Fishman Island, and is now heading towards there. Maybe this is where Luffy destroys Fishman Island, as was predicted by Madame Charlie, by intercepting Blackbeard because of Kuzan's information. And isn't that just convenient? The pieces are already in play because Sanji, this is his perfect time to rescue Pudding from Blackbeard if they clash at Fishman Island, knocking out two birds with one stone here. And if Mosa is Shirahoshi, then Loki finally gets to meet Shirahoshi or Mosa. So 3 birds with what? Wait, is that even the right saying? You know what I mean. Also, did you catch it? Blackbeard's mom, Eris, looks just like Nico Robin and Olvia, suggesting a fated connection between Blackbeard and Robin all this time. This may suggest that Eris actually betrayed Blackbeard, as crazy as that sounds. It's hard to believe that Blackbeard would get raised by a good-natured mother and still end up evil. Also, do you remember why Shanks visited Wano? Yes, it was because he feared Blackbeard might show up to take Pluton. But here's the real question. How on earth did he know that? Kuzan is most likely the answer. Even Burgess famously said, "I don't trust that Kuzan. I don't trust that Kuzan." And he said this even before the Wano arc. If I was to ask you what is Blackbeard's most defining trait in battle, it would be that he loves to attack people or groups when they are already weakened, such as what he did to Whitebeard. And Wano was in a similar position as Whitebeard himself. Literally the perfect opportunity for Blackbeard to attack. Kaido and Big Mom defeated, gone, done. Luffy and the Straw Hats tired and fatigued. The Scabbards tired and fatigued, meaning that the borders became more vulnerable to break and release Pluton. But then, conveniently enough, Shanks randomly shows up, suspecting Blackbeard's arrival. The only person who would leak this is Kuzan, and let me tell you why it would be Kuzan. Because Shanks acts as a bridge between the pirate world and the Celestial Dragon, the world government world. He was born and raised on a pirate ship, but then lived a few years in the Holy Land as a Holy Knight under Garling. So it is likely that Kuzan already has a good relationship with Shanks. Even the Marines respect Shanks. Look at how Sengoku spoke to him. Literally Kuzan's boss at that time. Oh, because it's you, Shanks, we will allow it this time. And lastly, the final bit of evidence is this panel, because both Blackbeard and Kuzan are going after the One Piece. If Kuzan was truly loyal to Blackbeard, then Kuzan wouldn't need to be here as a separate candidate. It's not like Oda shows Zoro separately from Luffy or Ben Beckman separately from Shanks, but Kuzan? Oda intentionally isolates him here, almost as if Kuzan's goals are fundamentally separate from Blackbeard's goals. This singular panel feels like foreshadowing that Kuzan was never truly on Blackbeard's side to begin with. All of this together has led me to one conclusion. Kuzan is a Straw Hat and Shanks spy. So did I convince you to join the agenda? Either way, definitely leave your comments down below as to what you think Kuzan's real motivations are. Red-haired Shanks might just be the greatest and healthiest depiction of masculinity in all of fiction. Not just One Piece, not just anime or manga, but in storytelling as a whole. Because when you really stop to think about it, what does it actually mean to be the strongest? What does it mean to be a man. Different anime and manga give different answers. For example, Son Goku, to him, strength means constantly seeking stronger opponents. For Guts, strength is survival in a cruel world where weakness can actually mean your death. And then you have Baki. Characters like Yujiro Hanma define their strength through absolute dominance, constantly proving that they stand above everybody else. However, it's not just their philosophies either. In many anime, masculinity is visually represented through impossible physiques, bodies so exaggerated that they redefine what strength is supposed to look like. For example, this is my physique, and let's be totally honest here, compared to these freaks, I am like an ant. I am literally tiny. But you get the idea. In many anime and manga, masculinity is often portrayed as the person with the greatest drive to prove their strength and take a bunch of steroids. But red-haired Shanks is different, because the greatest lesson Shanks teaches about strength is that real power doesn't need to prove itself. I highly urge you to stay till the end of the video, because I guarantee that this video will completely change your outlook on life and what it means to be a masculine person. In an era where people have this warped view of masculinity, red-haired Shanks, however, challenges the idea of traditional masculinity and offers the best solution that could change the lives of so many men, the same way he changed Luffy's life. One Piece is a series full of what you would think of as traditional masculine figures. You got Whitebeard, you got Zoro, Kaido, these exaggerated ideals of masculinity who pride themselves on how strong they are. It defines them. Zoro literally wants to be the strongest swordsman, and so he literally seeks fights. Kaido wants to turn the world into an open battlefield where only the strong rule over the weak. Are you seeing the pattern here? It's all about proving themselves. Shanks, however, is like the elephant in the room, the odd one out in One Piece and the odd one out in fiction. I know what you're thinking, but King of Toast, what makes Shanks so different from other strong characters? Isn't Shanks stronger than Zoro, Kaido and Whitebeard? Isn't Shanks literally a Yonko that nobody wants to mess with? The man who scared away an admiral with just his haki alone? Heck, the man who stopped the Marineford War just by showing up. You see, the key difference between Shanks and everyone else is one key trait: the ability to restrain himself. Shanks is okay with being humiliated, embarrassed, mocked, disrespected, and then having the sheer willpower to actually restrain himself, not feeling the need to prove anything. In chapter 1, Oda actually challenges what it means to be a coward versus what it means to be a man through Luffy, who the reader is following the story through. Higuma, your traditional man who sees Shanks' restraint as cowardice, literally having a bottle of sake smashed over his head and then Shanks just laughing it off. Luffy thinks this is flat out lame. Even Loki considered Shanks to be a cowardly pirate, and the reader probably thinks the same thing, but that's the genius behind this scene. Oda is challenging everybody here on what it means to be strong versus what it means to be a coward. However, this is what Luffy, Loki, Higuma and the rest of society gets wrong. What Shanks did was not cowardice, no. In fact, it was the opposite, because Shanks' core philosophy is that he will never use his Yonko level power to start a fight or to prove he's stronger, even if he literally got humiliated in front of his own crew. The only time Shanks has ever used his power over 1,000 chapters was for the sake of somebody else. He only fought Higuma when he captured Luffy. He only showed up to Marineford to end any more pointless deaths. He only attacked Green Bull when he threatened Wano. He only clashed with Whitebeard when it was necessary, when it was a fight worth fighting, where his life was on the line. Unlike Higuma, someone Shanks knows is much weaker than him. In essence, Shanks only uses his power to protect and defend. Shanks will never use his power to start a fight or to seek a fight or to prove himself. He feels 100% secure within himself, within his own masculinity, within his own power. Why fight a fight not even worth fighting? So what if some nobody smashed a bottle of sake over your head? I guarantee 99% of men would lash out in that same moment. But no, Shanks restrains himself and then laughs it off. That, my friend, is true strength. Knowing that you are strong enough to kick this guy's butt, however choosing to restrain yourself because this man is not worth fighting. Okay, so you might be wondering, okay, so when does Shanks actually believe that it is worth fighting then? Only when you hurt those that he cares about. In essence, Shanks will never use his power to attack. He will only use it to defend. This means that his masculinity is not defined by dominance like other characters. Instead, it is defined by responsibility. He is not trying to surpass anyone else. He is trying to be the best he can be for other people. Shanks is the peacemaker, the balancer, the protector, and because of his sheer willpower to restrain himself, the One Piece universe has actually rewarded Shanks with Conqueror's Haki comparable to Joy Boy, making him potentially the strongest character in the story physically as well. Isn't that just beautiful? Isn't that just poetic that the character who restrains himself the most, who is okay with being humiliated the most, is actually the strongest character? Wow, what a powerful message to send to young, impressionable readers. What an amazing male role model. And what's more, Shanks is not built like some bodybuilder. Yes, he's in shape, but his look is very much achievable, both mentally and physically. Shanks is the healthiest depiction of masculinity in fiction. I don't want to be like Goku. I don't want to be like Zoro. I don't want to be like Baki. No, I want to be like Shanks. So, the next time someone calls you a name, the next time someone attacks you, ask yourself, is this really a good reason to fight back? Ask yourself, is this a fight worth fighting? What would Shanks do? Remember to restrain yourself, because true strength is restraint. Even during times of humiliation, you don't need to prove your strength. By restraining yourself, you are the stronger one. However, when something precious to you is being harmed, that is when it's time to use your strength. That is what makes Shanks the greatest and healthiest depiction of masculinity in anime and manga and fiction as a whole. In the world of One Piece, we have the Yonko, the Admirals, the Warlords, etc. But have you ever thought about where One Piece YouTubers would actually rank within the One Piece world itself? And which character would represent each YouTuber? For example, which One Piece YouTuber would you consider part of the Yonko? Heck, who would you consider part of the worst generation? The Super Rookies? No. This is not your typical tier list or ranking that you usually see, because I don't think any YouTuber here is better than the other one. They are all geniuses at their craft. Rather, I am simply talking about what role would they embody and what devil fruit would each one have as well. And if this video does well, I will do a part 2 ranking which ones are the Admirals and the Warlords. But for now, we are doing Yonko and the worst generation completely separate from anything marine related. We are simply talking about pirates here. Also, disclaimer, just because somebody is in Yonko tier doesn't mean I think they are better than somebody in worst generation tier. This is not me saying anyone is above or below anyone, but some things are just based on true metrics such as influence. If anything, this is actually an appreciation video for the amazing One Piece community that we have here, who make each chapter week a time where we all come together and discuss the chapter with all the hype going on. So this is a celebration video if anything. So let's start with the Yonko. We only are picking 4 because that's how many there are in the actual series. Who could be Blackbeard? Is it even a compliment to be called Blackbeard? Well, to give Blackbeard the benefit of the doubt, there is no denying that Blackbeard is one of the most intelligent characters in the entire series. He didn't rise to become a Yonko through his sheer strength or numbers, no. He rose because of his master plan, spanning over decades, and his actual strength via devil fruits only came as a result of his planning, not training. And so, for me, the One Piece YouTuber who best represents Blackbeard would be Mr. Morge. Mr. Morge is the absolute GOAT when it comes to breaking down the structure of One Piece and actually analysing the story. And I'll be giving him Vegapunk's brain fruit because of this. The strength of the other Yonko is that they are great with theory type content, but Mr. Morge the exact same way Blackbeard has 2 devil fruits, Mr. Morge is not only good at analysis, but he's also very good at theories. So Mr. Morge is Blackbeard and he has the brain fruit. Now, moving on to the next Yonko. I know what you're thinking. So, who then represents Luffy? Well, my answer would be Grand Line Review, simply because he has broken free from the usual style of anime and manga type content, where you only really have manga panels to work with. Grand Line Review has the freedom to tell any visual story whether he uses manga panels or not, because he has made his own character models and designs, meaning he is able to use his imagination in any way that he wants to, just like Luffy in Gear 5. This means that when he wants to make a point, he doesn't have to go and find a manga panel to make it fit. No, he can just animate it himself, and that is freedom. And obviously I'll be giving Grand Line Review Luffy's Devil Fruit. So now we are at a pretty awkward stage, because it's not exactly nice to compare somebody to Boogie the Clown. So let's be real here, Boogie may be the Yonko to the rest of the world, but we all know that the actual Yonko figure of Cross Guild is Mihawk. And just look at who Mihawk actually is. He's a very low-key character. Whenever he does anything, it's very impactful and holds a lot of weight. And for me, considering Cross Guild are still relatively small, it makes this specific YouTuber fit despite not even having 100k yet like the other Yonko. And the YouTuber I'm talking about is Dawn and Dusk. This creator isn't always uploading every week like the other Yonko, but just like Mihawk, when they do upload, each and every video is an absolute banger due to it coming from a Japanese perspective. They are coming at a show from a completely unique angle. And Mihawk is the most unique pirate in One Piece because he's the only pirate who's conquered the New World, the Grand Line, without a single crew. He doesn't have a crew. He is the only pirate without a crew, and he conquered the Grand Line and the New World. That is unique. Nobody has done that before. And I'll be giving Dawn and Dusk the Yami Yami no Mi out of all things. There are 2 reasons. The first reason is that their videos have a space aesthetic going on, and that has clear ties to Blackbeard's black hole powers obviously. And the second reason being that the content just sucks you in. It's addictive. You can't take your eyes off the screen. It's as if you're being pulled by gravity itself. And we have seen Blackbeard use this gravity-like power. So, Dawn and Dusk, you are Mihawk with Blackbeard's Devil Fruit. Now, I'm going to make a bold decision and take Shanks out of the equation. I know, my favourite character is not going to be in this Yonko tier list. And that's because nobody really represents Shanks, so I'll do a replacement and do Whitebeard instead because he was one of the OG Yonko. And I think this clearly represents Ohara. Whitebeard was known as the world's strongest man. Ohara is the biggest YouTuber in the One Piece space. And I'm giving him the Gura Gura no Mi, the same devil fruit as Whitebeard, due to his ability to shake the One Piece YouTuber scene with every upload. What I love about Ohara is that he makes you feel the same level of hype that you feel when you watch or read One Piece the series itself. He makes you feel good and hyped, the same way Whitebeard gets you so hyped every time he is on the screen. Both Whitebeard and Ohara know how to entertain people, and they both have their reputation along with it. Right, we are done with the Yonko. Now we're going to move on to the worst generation, the up and coming Super Rookies. Due to the sheer number of worst generation members, I won't be going into extensive detail of why I chose them, but I will still give a brief overview. Otherwise it will just take way too long and I don't want to bore you. So obviously Luffy on Blackbeard is already used up. For Zoro, I actually got Sword Piece because bro goes missing for a few weeks but then randomly comes back with absolute bangers. Bro, stop getting lost. Trafalgar Law would be BDA Law because he is literally called BDA Law, bro. Kid would be Daxisake because using his magnet fruit he is able to pull in all the steel and materials to create weapons. The same way Daxisake uses as much evidence and ideas from as many different arcs, characters, themes, just from a whole bunch of things, and he creates theories from these. It's really creative and imaginative. He's like a magnet pulling in all these different ideas and he comes up with theories because of this. Scratchman Apu is Hidden Island because of his music intro. Bonnie would be Melon Tea because they're both girls with pink hair. Capone Beige, I honestly don't know. Maybe you guys can comment down below who you think fits Capone Beige. Killer would be Joy Boy Theories because he doesn't show his face. Eruge, Hawkins and Drake again. I have no idea. I think I need your guys' support for this. I don't want to force a connection, you know what I mean? So now that we're done with the worst generation, you might be wondering, where would I rank myself? Honestly, I have only just begun my journey. My Shanks video did really well, but essentially I am still East Blue level. At best, I have probably defeated Captain Kuro or Don Krieg. I believe that when you hit 1k, that's when you actually enter the Grand Line. But comment down below what you guys think. And if you enjoyed this video, then I'm sure you'll like this video, how Elbaf fixed One Piece. And massive thank you to my members, Cats Ate My Family, Uso Timor, and Mr. Bushido 56, you legends. And I'll see you some next time.